Welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. Let's talk money.
And welcome to the Money Mastermind Show. I am your moderator, Glenn Craig, and here are the brilliant minds that make up the Money Mastermind Show. We have Miranda Marquette, Kyle Prevost, Peter Anderson, and Tom Drake. And a special guest tonight, we have the one and only Rob Carrick, and he is the author of the book, How Not to Move Back In With Your Parents, The Young Person's Guide to Financial Empowerment. And he is also the personal finance columnist for Canada's Globe and Mail. Welcome to our show, Rob.
Thanks very much.
So for today's topic, we're going to discuss how much should you pay for your child's college education. So let me throw out a quick stat here. According to the College Board, public 4-year in-state tuition is expected to be about $9,000 per year. For private nonprofit 4-year, the tuition is about $30,000, and that's only tuition costs. That doesn't take into consideration any grants or tuition aids that the students may be getting. So, the question is, how much of that, as parents, should we be paying for the kids? Is it good that we pay for it? To what extent should we pay for it? So, what do you guys think? I'll go right to you, Rob. What do you think about the parents paying for college tuition?
I think they have to get involved in that. And I would say the quick answer to your question is as much as possible. And to support that, I'll just quote the massive levels of student debt that students in Canada and the United States have. It's crippling, and it's going to delay their evolution into productive tax-paying citizens. And we need to get them through university with smaller debt loads. I'm not going to say debt is out of the question, but I do think parents need to live up to their obligation of at least providing some level of financial assistance to their kids.
Okay. And with that assistance, we have to take into consideration the fact that as parents, can they afford to pay for the kids? Do you think parents should go into debt themselves or pull money from other sources? Peter, what do you think about that?
Yeah, it's definitely something where I think parents probably have to get in there and help a little bit. But when the cost of college is so high these days, I was looking at the stat from College Board, where the 4-year sticker price for today's newborn will be about $460,000. So that's accounting for a 5% annual raise in the cost of college. So to a degree, I don't think parents can totally pay for. Most parents can't pay for college for their kids. They're going to be able to pitch in some, but there has to be other things that come into the equation as well.
Okay, and how do you feel about that, Miranda? What do you think as far as the affordability for parents paying for the kids' college?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it has to do with where you're at. One of the problems we have here in the States is that a lot of parents, a lot of middle-class parents kind of fall into that gap where they're not poor enough to qualify for grants, but they don't make enough to actually afford paying for college. So I think that, what you have to do is kind of pull in a solution, a solution that includes many different sources, whether there's scholarships, you start saving ahead of time for 520, in a 529, having your kids take on some of it too. I really think it has to be a shared responsibility between parents and students, and you're going to have to look for funding from multiple sources. You can't rely on just one source when it comes to paying for college these days.
Okay. And
just an interesting thing here, Ipsos Public Affairs, they did a study asking where people are getting their college funding from, just to kind of throw it out there. And 30% were getting it from grants and scholarships. This is a total 100% number. 30% came from grants and scholarships, 27% from parent income and savings, 18% came from student borrowing, and 11% from student income and savings, 9% from parent borrowing, and then 5% from relatives and friends. So there's quite a mix of different sources for their tuition dollars there.
And what do you guys think about, we have to save for this money. How do you feel about taking money from alternate sources like retirement? So at what point do you put that money, like $1,000, do you put it towards your retirement funding, or do you put it towards college savings? So do you sacrifice one for the other? Because not everybody can handle both. How do you feel about that, Kyle?
I would put a slightly higher priority on the retirement saving if you have to choose. And again, obviously everyone's situation is different, what sort of style you want to lead in retirement or what sort of lifestyle you're looking for. But I'll say this though, I think it's really a matter of priority for a lot of middle class people. I mean, if we're talking about middle class people that don't quite qualify for many of the grants in Canada or the USA, because in Canada, we love probably one of the most expensive sports in the world in hockey, and I find parents never have a problem justifying hockey costs. In fact, they often justify it by saying, well, my kid's going to get a scholarship to go play hockey. And when you think about that logically, you could be making, I'm not saying give up hockey to play or to put your money in an RESP and pay for your kid's college. Maybe that's not a bad idea in some cases, but it's a matter of priority, and if parents were willing to put retirement savings and college savings in a high priority, I think the vast majority of the middle class could probably do both.
It's funny how you say that, because we have the same thing here in the States where the kids are in just about every sport and activity. But I'm willing to bet that if you went to most of them, they're not maxing out their rather student college funding options. So it's kind of funny. Rob, you went into this a little bit. With students taking on debt, what effect does that have on the economy for later on?
Well, I mean, in Canada, the average student who has debt graduates with about $26,000 in debt. It takes about 10 years to pay that off. And some students are probably going to need a little bit longer because they're working on contract and they're working at jobs way below their capacity. I mean, we in Canada and the United States, we have a population that's aging rapidly. In about 20 years, we're going to have about 1/4 of the population is going to be 65 plus. We need a lot of people paying taxes to support healthcare and and government assistance for these seniors. If we don't have that, the economy is going to be in a state of disequilibrium. So I think it's really important that we get students through university with a reasonable debt load. I mean, debt is an investment in your education. I think it's totally legitimate to do it. But one thing we need to talk about, though, is we need to help students make smarter choices about what they're studying and what they're incurring the debt for. I think there's a lot of people who are taking on debts, going to school to earn degrees that aren't helping them get a decent paying job.
Yeah, that does seem to be the problem, right? Where the stereotype is a student goes through $50,000 to $100,000 for the expensive private school, and they're coming out with a history degree that they can't get a job on, right?
That's the quintessential story right there. History, humanities, English, all these disciplines that don't have queues of jobs waiting for graduates.
Yeah, and I think really a lot of this stuff comes down to the parents and educating their kids as well, helping to set expectations with their kids about looking into the return on investment for the major and for the school that they're looking at going to. Telling them early, this is something that you're probably going to need to help pay for your own schooling. I'm not going to be able to pay for it all, so you need to be thinking about getting good grades, thinking about what you want to be doing with your life and what you want to be going to school for, and having and looking into schools that you can afford as opposed to just the schools that sound fun, or it's a party school, or you want to go with your friends or whatever.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in there quick, Peter, because you're talking about these parents having an investment chat with their kids, and I think that would be a great thing. However, in my experience and in the experience of my good friend Justin Bouchard, who co-wrote the book with me, he's a dean of residence. I'm a high school teacher. We see over and over and over again that parents can't even have a very basic talk about how much they can afford to give to their kids' education, or what a basic educational first-year post-secondary budget should look like. So I agree. That would be great if from a young age you were saying, here's these different types of post-secondary education, whether it's more of a vocational setting, whether it's more of an academic setting. It doesn't matter. In today's economy, you're probably going to need post-secondary of some kind. And here's what that should look like. That'd be great. But we're not even at the basic level yet where parents, it's still like a taboo topic. And I wish that parents could just sit down, because it's amazing how many kids and parents each think the other one is going to pay for university or college.
So I'm going to jump in here real quick too. When I was growing up, my parents sat me down and they actually kind of did, not quite looking at the numbers, but they straight up told me when I was in junior high, they said, you are responsible for your tuition. However you decide to do that, you're responsible for your tuition wherever you decide to go, and we'll cover your room and your board. And that was the deal they made with me. And then they said, so here are some ideas for how you can cover your tuition. Get good grades, get some scholarships, do some extracurricular activities. Here are some ways you can try and pay for your tuition to cover your end of it. And of course, student loans, or part-time job on campus or whatever. But they did sit me down when I was in junior high, and they did say, you are responsible for your tuition. You can go wherever you want, but you are responsible for your tuition. And that really stuck with me. And I did. I went out there, and when I finished high school, I had scholarship offers from various schools. And, and several of them were full tuition or full ride. So I think that kind of helps, like what Kyle was saying, is if you sit down and make your expectations clear, even if you don't talk, specific numbers, if you make those expectations clear, I think that helps. And we've already talked to our son who's just starting middle school. We've already talked to him and told him basically the same thing.
So we have to have more parents who are less afraid of their finances and less afraid of having this discussion with their kids. I mean, so a lot of other discussions we have with our kids once they're teens, with everything that's out there, drugs, drinking, sex, and whatnot. But we really need to have more of a conversation about the money and how they're going to afford college then. And it seems like we're probably not doing that enough, or at least looking ourselves as to what we can really afford to help them with. Along those same lines, with students having to pay and getting degrees at schools that they can't afford, do you think there's something to the value of them paying themselves as much as they can just to learn the value of their time and their money?
I think when I always said I had to pay for all my tuition. I only had a 2-year diploma, so it wasn't a whole lot. I got a student loan, and I think some of that will probably carry over when my kids are older, where I'm putting money into an RESP for them for sure, but I'm not necessarily prioritizing that I cover their full tuition or anything like that. There is something for to be said for them working towards what they want, but I prioritize retirement first, and then I can certainly help them beyond the RESP once that's done.
So, like, one way that a friend of mine had said that he paid for his son's college was he told him he would have to pay for the first year of school. And basically, if he did well enough, he would cover the rest.
That's interesting.
So think about that, though. That's that first year where you're out there, you're partying, you're building up a schedule, you're kind of really just getting your head around all this stuff, and it's probably the year where you're going to screw up the most, right? So don't do it on your parents' dime, do it on your own dime. Just a thought. I mean, because I think that kids, whether they're going to pay for it or their parents, they have to value what's going into it and what's going to come out of it once they're done. I mean, I don't know that a lot of kids understand that when they graduate, this debt is going to be hanging over them for quite some time. And what are they going to do with it? What do you think of some other ways that maybe we could have kids get involved with paying, or that parents could put money together to pay for college?
I'm going to tell you one little problem with this plan of getting kids involved in paying their own way through university or contributing is it's not easy to get a decent paying job as a kid. I mean, I've got two sons, one's 20, one's 17, and they both have jobs this summer. But my 17-year-old isn't going to get a whole heck of a lot of hours. And so he's not going to be earning a big whack load of money. Now, my 20-year-old, he's just finished his second year of university. He lives out of town where I have our ESP money, but this is sort of an example of how you can piece it all together. He's working hard all summer, May, June, July, August. He's working, he's working outside. He has to get up at 5:30 in the morning to get where he's going. And we're going to take that money, and I'm not saying he has to contribute every cent of it to his education because he's got to live and pay his rent and such. But we're going to take that, we're going to add it to the RESP money, and we're going to, or the educational savings money, and that will pretty much do it. But if he didn't have a job like that, what am I supposed to tell him? You know what? You can't make a job materialize. It's very competitive here to find decent paying jobs. And when I was in university, first of all, you could earn your tuition with one summer's work, and you didn't have to work that hard. And second of all, their jobs were hanging from trees. You just had to shake a branch, and a few jobs would fall off. You didn't like the job you had, you'd go out the next day and find another one. It's way harder now. So I think we have to be realistic about what our kids are going to go out there and earn. It may be that if they can't earn that much, then maybe they need to go to university part-time and maybe take 3 courses and work longer hours, or take 5 years to get a 4-year degree, or 6 years. I don't think that's a big deal. That may be another way to make it more affordable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the fact that they physically, that they actually can't afford to pay for it as they're going through it is certainly a big consideration. But what about, on top of what you were saying, instead of looking towards the great big golden school in the sky that's going to cost so much, go to a state or local school for your undergraduate that's just going to cost you a whole lot less.
That's just such a good idea. You know what? But there's like this prestige things, and I think the parents buy into it at least as much. That my kid's got to go away to school. It's some rite of passage, and it just, there's this reflected glory on the parents of their kids going away, and they're going to this school, and always the parents are just, making these schools sound so wonderful. I think a lot of parents they're going to have as hard an adjustment as the kids if their kids go to school in town.
It's like keeping up with the Joneses.
It is totally that.
I call that the team sports jacket mentality, when the mom and dad are more excited to wear the jacket of the travel team crest on it than the parents are. And it's bad in all sports, I find. It's amazing.
Yeah, that is totally true.
I remember when I was in school, my dad asked me, he's like, "Can you go and get me one of those stickers so I can put it on the car?" just so people can see where you're going. Or maybe in his mind, he's like, "You know what? He's actually going. That's great."
Yeah, well, when I brought, when I came back from Syracuse, I mean, my parents all got, Syracuse gear for their, for their birthday presents, I mean, and they were my dad still wears this Syracuse shirt that I got him. He loves it. He thinks it's great that he can, say I went there, I guess.
I guess it really is part of the question too. Are these college degrees that so many people are getting these days, are they overvalued? They graduate and then they're underemployed. They're working at a Starbucks or whatever. I mean, is that part of the issue as well, Rob?
Yes, is the short answer to that question. You know what I mean? I think we're talking about how parents have to work with their kids to help them, get their heads screwed on right about finances, but I think the schools have to jump into this too and tell kids where the jobs are and encourage them to develop the skills that are going to be worthwhile in today's workplace. You know what? Writing nice essays is important for communication, but I think, pound those math skills. You know what? Don't allow kids to think, "Oh, I'm not good at math. I'm just going to dismiss that. I'm not going to try hard at that." Math is like the key to so many good careers right now, and sciences as well. We need more people to think, "You know what? I might be able to do that," rather than thinking, "Oh, I'm an English person. I'm not a science person." We need the trades need to be better represented in schools, so people think that's a good viable option. If you're not academically inclined, and you like the idea of working for yourself and working with your hands, make this a desirable, interesting, career option. I mean, right now, I know in the high schools that my boys have gone through, the trades are not represented at all. It's unspeakable to go into a trade, I guess, because they never mention it.
Yeah, and I mean, we discussed this in the prior episode, but these days you can get a really good paying job if you're doing well in a trade compared to people who have 4-year degrees that are sitting there on thousands of debt. So yeah, it's an option that
with their debt, trying to pay it off by working at Starbucks.
Although now I guess if you work at Starbucks, you know, they'll pay your tuition, right? As long as you're going to Arizona State anyway.
But what was the stat? There's already 25% of the employees at Starbucks already have a 4-year degree.
Yeah,
I
something
think that
like
was
that.
the stat that was out there. So
Yeah, but you know,
You might go for another one.
Anything we can do to make that hipster stereotype a complete reality.
But no, I think that brings up another interesting point. Is Starbucks isn't the only company out there with tuition reimbursement programs. At my undergrad down in southern Utah, there were 2 different companies in town. I mean, there were call centers, but there were 2 different companies in town that offered tuition reimbursement. So, you know, so you could go and you could work there, and you know, you work your part-time shift or whatever, and after you've worked there for 6 months, they'll start reimbursing your tuition. And so I think that's another thing to consider as you're going through is where can you get a job where you might be able to find tuition reimbursement while you're going through school, and then also the idea of working on campus. I worked at the cafeteria on campus and got free meals for, you know, some of my stuff, so that helped with food. And then I worked as a dorm advisor, a resident advisor for my last 2 years, and got, you know, free housing as well as a stipend. So I think, I mean, Rob did point out that these jobs are more competitive now, but I think if you look around, there are some opportunities to be had.
And I think if more industries like a Starbucks jump in, hopefully you're breeding better incentive in your workers too, right? If you're working at Starbucks and you know you're going to get a degree out of this, or at least some tuition out of it, you're going to hopefully work pretty hard there, aren't you? I mean, there's some economic incentive for some of these companies to offer these.
You know, the problem is that a lot of these companies, though, are taking the exact opposite approach. So instead of investing in young people and trying to sort of, you know, create them into the workers of the future, they're saying, you know what, when you work for us, you work on a 6-month contract, and you have no job certainty, and you have no benefits, and you have no pension plan, and that's our commitment to you. And in fact, sometimes you're going to work for them for nothing through an unpaid internship. So I think, unfortunately, the Starbucks are in the minority, and most companies see, you know, young people as widgets that can slot into a job and then slot out as soon as they don't want to have that overhead anymore.
The student as cheap labor.
It is, you know what, and it's like a privilege to work for these companies. And as I say, you know what, the unpaid internship says, you know, we understand the job market is so competitive that people will do work for us for free. I mean, the idea is, oh yes, you're getting experience, but really, I think in most cases you're just providing free labor to a big corporation that could afford to pay you but chooses not to.
Another interesting conundrum we have with college tuition, for sure. There was a recent study that came out from the Brookings Institution, and it said basically that only 7% of students have over $50,000 in student debt. And what they were saying was also that pretty much debt as a percentage of what they make later on has remained more or less the same as it's been the last 20 years. What they think is the real problem is that people are coming out of college with a ton of debt, but no degree. What do you guys think of that, Tom?
Well, oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, that's obviously the biggest waste of money. if you're going to have the debt, even if you've got that history degree, that doesn't let you do much more than be a history teacher.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, sorry, Kyle. But if you're not even finishing the degree, then it's just money wasted. Even if it wasn't debt, one way or another, that's just a waste.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a growing problem, though. And I don't know, I didn't see anything that was written in there as to why these people are coming out with debt and not with the degree. But
you know, here's another problem that's happening, and it is people are going to get a degree, they're going into debt, and they're studying the wrong thing, and they realize it, and they think, oh no, I've got to take something else. So instead of getting a job and paying off the debt and getting on with their lives, they're actually going into a whole other course of study with another 3-4 years of tuition, or they're taking a master's and going to grad school, and then they're just compounding their debt. So they're actually getting 2 educations, and maybe the first one was a complete waste of time.
It's like getting one credit card to cover the other credit card, right?
Pretty much.
Or you just keep putting it off, and you hope that something will come out of it to kind of dig you all out of it. That's scary.
Yeah. And I think another problem, along with what Rob was saying about the debt, is they've done these studies about your brain and how you can't process these big numbers. So these kids are going to school, and it's all this nebulous money in the future, and so they don't think about how much debt they're racking up. And then all of a sudden, when it comes down to it, when it's all over, and they're still not looking at the big number, but when they look at that monthly payment and realize they can't afford it, then that's when it starts to get really ugly, I think, and really come home for them. But by then it's too late.
Yeah, that's got to be a scary thing. I mean, you go from what jobs do students usually work? They're not working full salaried jobs usually when they're going to school. And then all of a sudden at the end of 4 years, if they even graduate in 4 years, they have this big giant number. Of course they can't process it.
Yeah, and I think another thing to talk about with that whole idea is, if parents are paying that whole big number for the kids, they're another step removed from the whole process. They still can't process that because they don't even have to look at it. There was a study by Laura Hamilton, a professor of sociology at the University of California, Merced, and it found that kids' GPAs actually dropped when parents were footing the bill for college. And she called it satisficing, that kids were doing just enough to stay in school, that they were dialing down the academic effort and did less than the other students who were paying part or all of their own way. So I think sometimes when you have to take part of that process, paying your own college education, you have a better idea of how much money this is costing you, and you really want to get more out of it when you know how much you have to pay for it.
So there is some value to a student paying some part of it and discovering what the time and the dollar value of that is. It seems like you don't want to spoil a kid by paying it all, but if you flip the bill all onto them, it's just too much of a burden. So, excuse me. I think.
Yeah, I have another question. Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to ask Rob as well. I listened to him on another podcast, and he's talking about how it's important to set expectations for your kids when you're paying for them to go to college. And you talked about how you were helping your own son to do the budgeting and saying this money goes here and this money goes there. Do you think that's an important part of the process when parents are helping foot the bill?
I'd like to say that you should let your kids sink or swim, but if they sink, they can go down pretty far. So I'm just going to get out in front of it, and I'm going to work with my son too. And we are working all the time to sort of, I'm teaching him about budgeting and about putting money away for future needs, and to make sure that you don't spend it now because you're going to need it later. And I think he's really learning, and he's telling me he wants to do more of it, and I'm really happy with the way things are going. So I'm going to say my way actually is working in real life as we speak. You know what? A lot of guidance, a lot of hands-on. I'm not I don't pay his bills or anything like that, but I am sort of asking him every now and again. So you're current on this, you're current on that. Do you need any more? And I think things are holding together pretty well. I mean, he's not really a natural budgeting kind of person, but he is evolving into that. And I encourage parents to ask questions and to help where necessary, to say, this is how I budget, and this is how I make sure I have enough to pay my bills.
That sounds like a really great final word from you, Rob, to kind of tie everything together. One thing we do here is a final word from everybody to just see what everybody thinks about the subject for the night. So, Kyle, what's your final word on should parents pay for college education?
Well, I think they should. And as the only millennial here, I'm going to say, here's the deal. Don't talk about this back in my day stuff. And if you want to be proven wrong, if you're one of those people, just Google Rob Carrick, and you're going to find a whole schwack of stuff that proves decisively that you're wrong. And I know that if I walk into any room full of 35 to 60-year-old people and say that voice this opinion, they're going to tell me there's going to be a lot of high-strung opinions flying either way. But the bottom line is that education costs have risen at far more than the rate of inflation. The job economy is at least as bad, if not worse, than at any point for youths in Canada, and I believe in the USA as well. So, yeah, I think what Rob said is right. It's sort of that generational pact or that sort of societal contract, or however you want to phrase it, that we should be helping out the next generation to some degree and as much as you can. And Miranda, just to finish, you were talking about your dad wearing a Syracuse shirt. I got my dad a shirt that said, "My kids and my money went to the University of Manitoba," and he's so proud of that one. He thinks that's the funniest thing.
Nice.
On that note, Miranda, what's your final word?
Well, I think that it should be a combination. I think that you definitely need to have your kids own a portion of their school costs, but at the same time, I do think you ought to help. My husband and I have been contributing to a 529 for our son for almost 6 years now, and I think that's one way to start doing it early. But at the same time, I do want him to take some ownership with a part of his education, and I would like him to help out with that as well.
And Peter, what's your final word?
My final word is I come to somewhere in the middle. I don't think parents should pay the entire cost, especially with how few people are saving enough for their own retirement. But I do think it's a good idea to help your kids out where you can. But I also think it's good to do that education with your children up front, set expectations with them early, and encourage the children to examine the ROI of their education, of what major they're choosing, what school they're going to. And then set some clear expectations of them when you're giving them money, when you're paying for their schooling. Let them know that you would like them to do their best in school. Maybe you can set a minimum GPA. Some parents will do that. I don't know if that's necessarily the answer, but set some expectations and have them put some skin in the game as well. They should be paying for part of their education, I believe.
And Tom, what's your final word?
I think that at the very least, everyone should take advantage of the savings plans they have. It's the 529 in the States and the RESP here. Here in Alberta, we also have an additional one. Basically, between the $7,200 for the RESP maximum grant and then another $800 to the Alberta government, that's $8,000 in free money just to make sure you're kind of maxing out those savings plans. So at the very least, do that because it'll give them a little bit of a helping hand.
And Rob, do you have anything that you'd like to add as a final word to our discussion here on parents paying for their children's education?
Well, one last thing I'd like to say is that parents and kids should probably start thinking about this when your kids in about grade 10. And parents, if you have young kids, still get a savings program going for them. Don't wait till they're 15 or 16 to think about beginning your savings. Putting even like $100 a month or $1,000 a year even is significant, and even $500, a few $100s a year. If you might end up paying your kids' first year of university for them, it's get on this. Do not wait till they're graduating from high school.
Thanks a lot, Rob, and we really appreciate having you on the show with your expertise. Can you tell our audience a little bit about your book and about where they can find the book and where they can find you online?
Sure. The book is called How Not to Move Back In With Your Parents, and available from Amazon easily. I'm the personal finance columnist for the Globe and Mail, Canada's national newspaper, and globeandmail.com, or just Google my name. You'll come up with more stuff than you'd ever want to read.
Thanks again, Rob. And thank everybody for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Please make sure to follow us, moneymastermindshow.com, and you'll find all of our other social media spots there, such as our Google Plus page, our Twitter account, our YouTube page. And until next week, be good with your money. Thank you and good night.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Mastermind Show. Get more information at moneymastermindshow.com. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes and YouTube and follow us on Google Plus.